My name pass it over to Shreyas. I did just want to share one of his passion projects, which many of you might be aware of, and I can stop the music here. It's his course on PM career management. You can see the course homepage here. It's his current passion project, and I'm sure many of you may be aware that he's been teaching this. It's available on Maven, and since he started teaching it over a year or so, there's been over 2,000 PMs and senior product leaders who have taken this course. You can see the course content over here, who's taken it, and it's more than just product people. It's also been different functions, and there's also been PMs from literally all kinds of companies take the course, whether it's very large companies or startups as well. There's more to come just around sharing the course content, and there's actually a special announcement coming on later in the seminar. But I just got the all clear from Shreyas, and with that, I think I will pass it over to him. Shreyas.
Thank you, Shrey. It's great to see everyone join. I'm just thrilled today to be sharing my thoughts with you all on this fun topic of PM Eng design collaboration. And if you've been to one of my seminars before, that there's going to be a lot of real talk in this seminar, and there will be few, if any, likely zero platitudes, because you all already know those platitudes. And I'm especially thrilled to talk about this topic because I've shared these ideas privately a few times. You are the very first group with whom I'm sharing these ideas like this live publicly. So we will go through a lot of material in the next 75 minutes or so. So let's just get started. And in case you don't know who I am, I'm Shreyas. This is a glimpse of my career over the past 23 years or so. And I wanted to just mention an important message, just clarifying that I do these seminars to help people in their product jobs and to help their teams at work. And one thing I wanted to call out is you're more than welcome to post what you're learning on your social media. In fact, in some ways, I would love it. Feel free to even post any kind of screenshots from our seminar today on your socials if you'd like. But I do not do these seminars for people to use what I share, the content I share, for, say, somebody's courses side hustle or their newsletter side hustle or their creator ambitions. Now, I know this message doesn't apply to 99% of you because you're just doing your job. So in this slide, I'm really talking to perhaps less than 1% who might be doing some sort of side hustle related to content. By all means, do your side hustle. Absolutely. But please do not repackage the content and ideas I share today in your course or newsletter or whatever else. Okay. So with that, what I wanted to share is obviously how we're going to spend our time together. I initially intended for this seminar to actually just be a Q&A with a high emphasis on candor and telling it like it is. You ask questions, I answer those questions. But as I thought through this and saw people's questions, just to give you a view, here are some questions people asked on LinkedIn and Twitter around various themes. By the way, really awesome questions. So thank you for posting them. But as I saw these questions, I realized that it would be helpful for us to get on the same page on some vocabulary and some what I call foundations or fundamentals that unfortunately many people are never taught and most people are not aware of them. Okay. So specifically, I felt like I should share 4 foundational ideas and frameworks that most people are not consciously aware of. And even if they are aware of them, they don't have the words to speak about these foundational ideas tangibly in a way that their team can understand. Okay. So we'll start with these 4 foundational ideas in a presentation of about 25 to 30 minutes. And listen, don't worry. These 4 ideas are going to be very candid, right? So ideas you almost never hear within your own company or at large conferences. Okay. And as you hear what I say in the next 25, 30 minutes, feel free to post your questions on Slido, right? There should be a link in the Zoom chat as well, but you also have it in Slack. And then after I'm done with my presentation, we will break for Q&A. We'll break for Q&A and some announcements about my course, like Shrey mentioned. And then we'll resume with more Q&A, right? So we're not done. We'll resume with some more Q&A. There will be a break in between once I'm done, but there'll be more Q&A. So this means we'll go at least 1 hour, 10 minutes from this moment right now, okay? So this seminar will go on at least for 1 hour, 10 minutes from this moment right now, okay? Maybe even a little, maybe a couple of minutes longer. Let's see. Okay, so with that, let's dive right into the first foundational idea. And here's the thing. We cannot talk about PM, Eng, design collaboration without talking about the role of a PM. Okay, so the reason is that a lot of the confusion around collaboration between PM, Eng, design stems from a misunderstanding about the real role of a real PM. And I do a lot of reading and online mostly, and I'll sometimes read things like, you cannot define the role of a PM. The role is to actually do whatever needs to be done and things of that nature. I'm sure you've heard and read these things too. And guess what? It's just not true. It is completely false. Okay. Now, while the specifics of exactly what a PM does may vary from company to company, the essence of the PM role is actually quite clear and quite unambiguous. Okay. So I'll share what this is. But before we do that, let's watch a couple of really fun videos around this topic from the folks at TLDV. They're probably my favorite TikTok channel. They by far have the best TikTok account for folks in tech. So be sure to check them out. It's just very funny. So with that, here's the first video where they play a guess who game on what the role of this person is. Okay, it's a guess who game on what the role of this person is.
Shreyas, are you presenting screen?
Sorry, we've got a slight glitch here with Google Slides. Give me a second. I have to reload it. All right, let's watch it.
People don't know what you actually do. Okay. You decline every meeting you possibly can. Ooh. If you wanted an easier workload, you should have just gone into consulting. Okay. And you're not a project manager. Product. I'm a product manager. Yup. You should really make these harder.
On to the next one.
As a PM, your main asset is your ability to listen. And one way you can show you're listening is by repeating what someone says right back to them. Hey, apparently our app has crashed. Our app has crashed, apparently. Okay, so what should we do? What shall we do? This way your team really understands that you're listening to the information that they're giving you. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to go speak to Dev myself. No, I'm going to go speak to Dev. No, don't follow me, please. Okay.
All right. So with that, here's my definition of the role of a product manager, right? And it is to define the product and orchestrate actions across the org to enable its success. Okay, so there are 3 parts here that are extremely important. So I'm going to emphasize them a bit. First one is define the product. Okay, this is the most important part of the real role of a real PM. You must be the primary one. You must be the primary person responsible for defining what product you're going to build, what product your team is going to build. If you're not primarily responsible for defining the product we are going to build, then regardless of your title, you're not doing a real PM role. And this works both ways. So if you don't have the PM title, but you are primarily the one defining what product to build, then I would say you're basically performing the PM role. Okay. So that's the first key part. The second key part is to orchestrate actions. Okay. Orchestrate actions. And this is the part that most PMs spend a majority of their time on. And this is absolutely essential. But I will also say that if you're not defining the product, if you're not primary in defining the product, and you are largely just orchestrating actions, I'm sure you're very busy in doing it, but you're not performing the real role of a real PM. Okay. Maybe you are performing a project manager role. All right. And the third and most important part is product success. Now, I'll tell you there are many definitions of the PM role that are not direct enough. They talk about things like impact and customer happiness and problem solving and whatnot, customer obsession, all of that, all of which are, of course, useful, right? But why are we doing this job? Why are we doing this job? Why are we spending millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of our company's money on this product? We're not just doing that just to solve customer problems. We're doing that to make our product successful, make our product win. Okay. And I want you to understand this is not a point about it's not a semantics point. Okay. It is a foundational difference. It took me almost 10 years of being a PM to learn that if you do your job thinking that your main job is to make your product successful, to make it win, you will do it very differently than if you do your job thinking that your job is to make customers happy or to bring customer satisfaction, to solve customer problems, or to channel your team's talents and resources to make something useful or some other kind of feel-good goal. Okay. Now, while it took me 10 years as a PM to learn this, I consider myself lucky because I noticed that some PMs never learn this, right? And then lastly, since many of us are PMs here, of course, we will like to ask, okay, but what's the definition of success here, right? What does success look like? So in my book, the definition is some combination of user adoption, user satisfaction, and unique business impact. Okay. All right. So this is the first idea, first foundational idea. And the key thing I want you to remember from this, which will come in handy for us later, is that the main part of the PM job, the main thing in the PM job is to define the product. Okay. Next, I wanted to pivot to another topic, which is likely among this, and it's going to be a framework. This is likely among the top 10 most important frameworks I will ever share. And the reason I say that is that once you understand this framework, a lot of what's around you in your company with regards to the power that PMs have or don't have, with regards to who gets to call the shots, who gets to be in the driver's seat, why is engineering so laid back and doesn't seem to care about users enough? Or why is there such a turf war between PM and design on who gets to own product strategy? This framework will actually help you understand the root cause of the vast majority of such questions. Okay. So with that, let's get ready. And here's the thing, pay attention. And if you're multitasking right now, stop multitasking. Pay close attention to the words I'm saying and the visuals I'm going to show you in the next 7 or 8 minutes. Okay. But before that, let's watch this video on how product managers sound.
I'm essentially CEO of the product. Is there a workaround? Is there a workaround to work around that workaround? Let's just A/B test it. Did we talk to the customer? Remember, customer is king, but sometimes the customer doesn't know what they want. Apple, Steve Jobs, it's all about data. Sometimes you just gotta go with your gut, okay? Because it's not all about data. I totally get what you're saying. Unfortunately, oh, that's great. Unfortunately, that's been deprioritized. Unfortunately. Agile, this is our iPhone moment. Roadmap. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. Steve Jobs.
Now, one of the most common questions I've gotten when I'm interviewing PMs at whatever company I'm at. So I'm the interviewer, there's a PM candidate before me. And I, at some point in the interview, usually towards the end, I say, so what questions can I answer for you? Right. One of the most common questions I get in response is some question along the lines of, so what is the PM culture at this company? Okay. And for a while, I would ask clarifying questions like, what are you really trying to understand? And usually what people are trying to understand via this question, is this company product led? Or is this company PM led or PM driven or something like that? Right. And the other variants of this. Here's the thing. As I started learning more about what candidates were really looking for and what I myself was looking for when I was looking for a job, is that they were really interested in learning the following question, right? Which is, how much influence do PMs have on product direction here? Okay. How much influence do PMs have on product direction here? That's essentially what they're trying to learn through this question, is what I understood. Took me a while, but that's what I understood eventually. Or in other words, what PMs are trying to figure out is, if I get hired here, if I join this company, how much say will I have in what happens? Okay. And this is a perfectly rational question for any candidate to ask. Because if you've been one of these candidates who's asked such a question before, you already know that the responses you tend to get are far from articulate. They're usually some gibberish. Okay. I have myself been guilty of this in the past, where my response had a whole lot of words without saying much. Right. But fortunately, I learned some things later in my career as a PM leader, which I would like to share with you all today. Okay. And so before I do that, I thought this chart from Lenny was very interesting. This is from a poll he did in his newsletter. So this is from his newsletter a few years ago. And this is about, basically, the poll was about various things around PM, but specifically this one is about how much influence do PMs have across different companies. And so here you'll notice some interesting things like in Zynga, right? Basically, PMs are running the show. Then you have places like Twitter, and this is Twitter a few years ago before Elon, and Twitter. And I can confirm that because I worked at Twitter. Twitter PMs had a lot of influence, a lot of say, and they were more dominant than other functions, certainly in the consumer side of Twitter. The ad side of Twitter was, back then when I worked there, a little more balanced. But the consumer side of Twitter, PMs were basically running the show. And there was a lot of conflict with design as a result. Okay. And again, we'll come back to how that conflict happens. But then you have companies, other companies I know, even if I'm not worked at them, I know because I've talked to many people there. Uber, again, a lot more influence. Then you start getting to where it's in the slightly more region, which is essentially that PMs have the same degree-ish of influence, because as PMs, we sometimes tend to overestimate how much influence our function has. And over there, you have companies like Amazon and Google. Notice YouTube somehow is in the a lot more bucket. But again, according to this poll, Google was more they do have more influence, but not exceptionally more. Facebook is in that category. And then you have companies towards the right-hand side, like Stripe, again, where I worked. And Stripe is literally exactly the same, meaning PMs have the same influence as other functions. Plus, you have companies even more to the right? Where Apple, it seems people observe that companies have basically less influence or PMs have less influence than other functions. Okay, so this is just it is interesting, directionally interesting. Obviously, this is not a scientific poll, but I like it because it is directionally interesting. It is directionally correct according to my observations. Which then now brings me to the three types of PM cultures, starting with PM dominated. Okay, so PM dominated is the first type of PM culture. This is the type of culture where PM just calls the shots. The other functions are usually just viewed as resources to enable the PM to do what they want to do. Okay, so now because of this, the other functions, especially engineering, can often just check out. They check out and stay in their lane. Okay. Turns out that almost every highly successful company eventually becomes PM dominated. Only question is how long it's going to take. Okay. So as examples, Yahoo, when I was there, 2006 to 2008, particularly starting 2007-8, was very much PM dominated. And it seems like this has always been the case with Zynga, for instance. Next type is PM guided, right? Okay, so this is where PM has decent influence. Okay, but it does not have dominance. This is the kind of culture where there's often healthy tension and conflict between PM, engine design on what product to build. right? There are passionate debates at times, frustrating debates at other times, right? Now, here's the observation. The products that come out of such cultures tend to be fairly high quality, it turns out. Okay. And then the last one is PM serviced. Okay. So this is the third type of PM culture. And this is where PMs are often doing project and program management for a significant portion of their time, 90%, 80+% of their time. That's what they're doing. And even if you want to get recognized as a PM in such a culture, you have to just basically look favorable to another dominant function, usually engineering, sales, or in some cases, design. Okay. And this is what I call PMs as housekeeping. And some examples here are, it turns out Google early on in its own journey of establishing a PM team was a PM service culture. In fact, even when I joined Google in 2008, even many parts of Google at that point, or most parts of Google at that point, were very much PM serviced culture. And at Google, of course, the function we were mainly serving was engineering. Okay. And it seems like perhaps Apple has always been that way as well, where maybe the primary function that you're serving is marketing and the design side of things, whether it's industrial design or otherwise. Okay, we're actually going to, I know this is a lot of information. Okay, so we're going to take a look at each of these separately in a few minutes. So if you miss some detail, don't worry, you'll get another chance. But at this point, you're probably wondering, okay, but this is all too much information. So how do I figure out what type of PM culture exists within my company? Or if I join a new PM org within a large company, how can I tell if the PM culture of this new org is different from the PM culture of my old org, right? Or if I'm talking to a new company for a job, how can I figure out from talking to their PMs what type of PM culture they have? Okay, so for that, we're going to formalize the main criteria in framework form. Okay, now at this point, I'll ask for your maximum concentration for the next few slides. Okay, ready? Let's go. All right, so this is what the framework looks like, right? This is the best way I have found to identify if a given company or org has a PM dominated culture, PM guided culture, or PM serviced culture. Okay. No, this is also a lot to take in. So we're actually going to break this framework down step by step. Okay. So here are the bands that each of these three PM cultures occupy. All right. But let's get to the very beginning. The way to figure out the type of PM culture of a given org or company is first to think about the competence of a given PM. Okay. So a given PM, a given product manager within a team, can have low competence or high competence. Okay. Can have low competence or high competence along the lines of what we define the PM role is, right? Which is to define the product and orchestrate actions across the org to make the product successful, right? So they can either have low or high competence along a certain continuum that's shown in this horizontal axis here. Okay. Next, on the vertical axis, we look at the degree of influence that PM has over product decisions. So this is related to the data we saw earlier from Lenny's newsletter, right? So these are the types of decisions, the product decisions we're talking about are, what is our product strategy? What are our prioritization criteria? Should we say no to this large customer request or should we say yes? Should we take time to build a higher quality, more full-featured product, or should we aim for a quick ship? When the stakes are high and it isn't clear what to do, should we do A or should we do B? Who has the biggest voice in that? Whom does the CEO look to for making the call on these things? Or whose input does the CEO weigh more heavily in these situations, right? So what you'll notice is for a given org or company culture, despite whatever people say, there is usually one function that gets to call the shots on these types of important questions, okay? All right, so that's what this degree of PM influence is. What degree of influence would such a PM have? So with this, if we now look at the bottom right section of this 2D space, so that is the situation when even a PM with a high competence has low, at best, medium degree of influence over product decisions. Okay? So when this is a common situation, that company's PM culture is what I call PM serviced. Meaning, even if you're extremely competent, you either have a low or at best medium degree of influence over product decisions. You could be the best PM in the world, right? But you only have a low degree of influence or at best a medium degree of influence over product decisions. If that is the situation in a given company, that company likely has a PM service culture. And this is when some other function, usually engineering or sales, is top dog. Okay, and PM's job is first to make sure it's serving this top dog function. Okay. All right, next. Now we look at the top left part of this two-dimensional space. Here we have a situation where a low to medium competence PM. So a PM who's like 60th, 70 percentile or lower. Sometimes a PM who's even in the bottom quartile of PMs at the company still has a high degree of influence over product decisions. So here, this kind of PM who's say in the bottom quartile, like bottom 25% of PMs in terms of competence, is still able to wield a lot of influence, mainly because of his or her title, not because of the quality of ideas or abilities, right? So when this is usually the case in a given org, it has a PM-dominated culture. PM-dominated, okay? And this is in some ways the opposite of a PM service culture. Lastly, we have this middle part in the 2D space. And this one is a little more nuanced, so pay attention, okay? This is a culture in which a high competence PM has a high degree of influence over product decisions, okay? But unlike a PM-dominated culture, a low competence PM does not get the same luxury. A low competence PM can at best exert low to medium influence over product decisions. And in that case, when it's a PM who has low competence, the influence delta is taken on by somebody in some other function, usually more competent product person, whether it's in engineering, sales, design, product ops, or somewhere else. Okay, so in a PM guided culture, PMs don't just get the luxury of calling the shots because they have the PM title. Okay, but if you're a strong PM, then the culture actually lets you wield more influence on the product, both macro and micro. All right. So with that, we can go to each of these, right? So again, pay attention to these. You're welcome to take a screenshot of it if you want. Basically, this is what a PM-dominated culture looks like, right? Like it's PM as a dictator, and other streams are treated as resources. Okay, this is what a PM-guided culture looks like. And the best metaphor I found for this it was from an unrelated to PM book, but I thought the metaphor was good, which is PM as a tour guide, which is if you hire a tour guide in a new city or country you're visiting, you don't want the tour guide to just basically dominate everything you do. You want the tour guide to give you some space to explore. But at the same time, you don't want the tour guide to not have an opinion. You want the tour guide to have some idea of where he or she wants to take you and what is worth seeing. But at the same time, the tour guide cannot be too dominant and at the same time cannot be too loose, okay? So that's why I thought the PM as a guide metaphor, a tour guide metaphor, is really great to describe this. And then lastly, this is what PM service is, right? This is PMs as housekeeping. This is a point of frustration for many talented PMs. Okay, so with that, let's move on to our next idea, which is a relatively simple idea. But more than an idea, this is a mindset and a way of operating and a way of leading. Once you understand it and you internalize this mindset, you will be way less frustrated as a senior leader, whether you are in PM, Eng, or design, even in situations which are currently very frustrating for you. Okay? So here it is. Inner world, outer world. Inner world, outer world, right? This is your inner world. You are a leader of a team. Now, even if you're an individual contributor, you lead the team that's working with you on building whatever features. Okay? So each one of us has an inner world. Now, sometimes our inner world is smaller when we have less scope, and sometimes it's very large when we have high scope. Okay? But we all have an inner world. Then there is the outer world, which is the rest of your company. Okay? So what I want you to understand is the inner world is more in your control. And I want you to accept that you have near zero control in the outer world. Okay? This is very important. I've chosen every word here very carefully. But don't get demoralized because you have near zero control. Because a lot of people make the mistake of thinking everything outside needs to be fixed first. And then everything in my inner world will work just fine. But that's not how it works in reality. I want you to first focus on the inner world. Okay? I want you to identify what you can change here. You don't like a process that the company expects. You don't like a certain kind of power dynamic, right? Like maybe your company, the outer world, says that your team should be basically, it should be PM dominant, right? But maybe you're suffering quality issues because of that. So guess what? You can change your inner world to not be PM dominant and instead be PM guided. And listen, don't use whatever is happening in the rest of the company as an excuse for no action. This is the mistake many talented PMs and PM leaders make, even engineering leaders and design leaders, right? Okay. This will always be dominant. I want you to remember. Okay. And you can't change everything within your team, but you can actually change a lot more than you think. All right. And it is way easier than changing the entire company, but it will require you to exert and exercise influence with your team. Right. And at times you'll need to take risks and you'll need to bend some rules. I'm not taking break laws or break rules, but you might need to bend some rules. Okay. And guess what? When you do that, you'll need to shield your team from some company level BS, right? So this is where the metaphor of being a shit umbrella, a leader is a shit umbrella. You have to be that shit umbrella at that thick interface between your inner world and the outer world. Okay. So this is the mindset I want you to really understand. And over time, I really need you to internalize this mindset as a leader. Okay. Last of the 4 ideas. We looked at PM culture earlier and also how that influences the engineering and design culture. But now I wanted to shed some light on some subcultures that can exist within each function, within the engineering function, within the PM function, within the design function. And particularly these subcultures are actually the cause of a lot of dysfunction in Eng, PM, and design interactions. And then that is a cause of frustration and unhappiness. Okay. So before we get into that though, I thought this is a fun look at how different functions work with each other at times within product companies.
Hi, your software doesn't have a collaboration mode. Yeah, that's right. It doesn't. Yeah, but I was told that it would. Who told you it would? I don't know, the sales guy who sold it to me. Can you hang on a second? Did you tell the customer that our software has a collaboration mode? Oh yeah, I totally did that. But it doesn't. Yeah, but if our software couldn't do that, then they weren't going to sign up. What did you think was going to happen when they realized that it didn't? Yeah, but product told me that they were making it a feature, so I was just hoping it would exist before the customer noticed. Hold on. Hey, what's up? Why does sales think you're adding a collaboration feature? A what? Yeah, that tracks. Like something you can work on together, edit at the same time, that kind of thing? Never heard of that. What? That's not a bad idea. 1 second. Is it too late to add one more feature to this sprint? I can fix the bugs, or I can add the new feature. Then let's do both. Cool. Good. 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 Good news. So that feature is coming, just not for another week or so. Who is running this place? Hey Siri, what is Agile?
Again, strongly recommend TLDV videos, really fun. All right, so this is basically the last slide of my presentation is coming up and shit is about to get real. So I thought I'd add this interstitial. What you're about to see in the next couple of minutes is something that might feel uncomfortable, and I wish I did not have to talk about it. But the reality is I see it nearly everywhere, okay? So a lot of people and teams are suffering because we do not have the vocabulary for these anti-patterns I'm about to talk about, and because no one else talks about this stuff. Now, since you all have taken time out of your Sunday to listen to me, I thought I'd just be straight and honest with you, okay? So with that, here are the 4 common drivers of dysfunctional PM, Eng, and design subcultures. Let's start with engineering. Okay, with engineering teams, I've seen these 4 types of subcultures. These are again anti-patterns. Okay, so there's the promotion driven. I think everybody understands this, where work is taken up not based on what's going to drive impact, but what's going to get an engineer or a tech lead or an engineering manager promoted. Okay, this is famously the case for Google these days. Rumor has it, right? Another one is happiness driven. And this I see all the time, where the primary goal of the engineering leaders is to keep the engineers happy, every single engineer happy. And so that's the lens through which every decision is taken. Okay. Another one is systems driven, where engineers want to build the right systems. And there's nothing wrong with building the right systems, but sometimes they take it too far. They take it too far. Okay. And they're spending inordinate amounts of time on optimizing a system that hasn't had much business impact yet. And they think making beautiful systems is their main job. Okay. And the last one, the last of the 4, is expectations driven, where engineering basically doesn't care that much about the actual impact of their work. All they want to do is to set low expectations and then show how they met those expectations related to deadlines and shipping on time and product quality and other factors. Okay? Next, PM. CEO driven. This is very common, right? Because the CEO tends to channel often their things, their ideas through PM. And there are some PM subcultures that will essentially embody that, which is we'll basically just do what the CEO wants to do. And our job is to decode what the CEO wants to do. Okay? Another one is ideas driven. I fell prey to that, ideas driven myself in the past. Okay, where it's like, oh, I have these cool ideas and I want to see them in reality, see them become real. Another common one is activity driven, where the PM is just, okay, let's be busy. Let's make sure we efficiently make everything efficient, 5%, 10%, 2%. If you have a small business and you make that 5% efficient, it's still not a great business. Lastly, another one that frustrates a lot of teams is like sometimes PM subcultures are very driven by short-term OKRs. Okay. Design. All right. So one anti-pattern is virtue-driven design. This is where design teams say, oh, we want to focus on user delight and customer delight. And you know what? Like we need to be users first. All of it sounds great. But the problem is that they fixate on that stuff and not think about business value. We had this problem at Twitter back in the day when there were some people on the design team who thought that it is evil that Twitter shows ads. And while, okay, that's a very virtuous position to take, and yes, people are going to say, oh, you're such a good human being. The reality is all their salaries and the stock and all of that they were so happy about was paid through the ads. And so it's, again, this is actually fairly common and it's hard to fight. Okay. Another one that's common among design teams is peer validation driven, where like sometimes they're producing designs more out of what's going to be validated in their design crits. Okay. Another big one that is a common source of frustration for engineers and PMs is research driven, where it's like everything, oh, it needs to be researched. Does research support that? And then lastly, there's some, this is less common, but still I've seen it a few times, where it's driven by what's going to look good on my portfolio eventually. Okay. So again, there's a lot to dig in here that we'll dig into in the Q&A session, but I thought I'd share some of these truths with you. As you see, this will now start making sense with regards to what in your own world and the cause of some of the dysfunctions in your own world. Last slide for my prepared presentation. I highly recommend getting this book, The 7 Rules of Power by Jeffrey Pfeffer. Now, for a long time, I want to say I resisted Pfeffer's work because I thought power was an ugly word, but I was wrong. Okay. I do not want you to make the same mistake I did. So I'd recommend you get the audiobook version of this book, or if you're into that, or if you just get like a regular print or Kindle copy. All right. So now I'm done with the presentation and a Q&A is coming up. Okay. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time on Q&A. I am running a little behind. So what we're going to do is we're just going to extend the Q&A by 10 more minutes. So we'll go 30 minutes past the hour. Everything is recorded, so you need not worry. So we are going to do an extended Q&A. Okay. But before that, I wanted to hand it over to Shrey for some announcements about the PM career course that he talked about earlier.
Thanks, Shreyas. I know some of you missed the beginning, and there's been a few that have actually even DM'd me on Slack. I should have mentioned this right at the beginning. Apart from Shreyas, if you DM me on Slack, there's just very likely to be a lag because I'm helping run a lot of things at the seminar primarily. Anyhow, just wanted to say a quick announcement on the course, and I'll try to tackle some of the individual DMs I got with this. So the next cohort of the course is starting in exactly 4 weeks. This course is live and it's very interactive. It is not a Zoom webinar, which is what you all are seeing. And the main differences are that you can actually see your fellow students. You can get into breakout groups and talk to one another. You can unmute and ask your questions to Shreyas live, and there'll be several dedicated Q&A sessions with Shreyas. It also has more than 10 hours of content, which really condenses a couple of decades of Shreyas's experiences and the experience of some of the most prominent PM leaders and executive recruiters in this world. I'm just going to quickly show the course homepage. It's also in bit.ly/Shreyas-course right at the bottom over here. So this is Shreyas's course. on career management for product managers. Shreyas created this course because he found that there's a huge gap right now, just in terms of understanding how you should navigate your career. He found that he can really be able to help and advise folks to navigate your career so you can create a great career that works for you. This is a course syllabus, by the way. You can just see the individual times here and the specific modules that the course goes into. They're very hefty: how to grow your competence, how to shortlist companies, how to get hired, and obviously day 2, it continues. So Shreyas really did create this course based on hundreds of coaching conversations that he's had with product people, very capable people he found that did not have the right frameworks and right ways of thinking about their own careers, really. And as Shreyas mentioned earlier on, and something that he kind of references multiple times, I've been working with him for over 2 years, so it's ingrained in me, that really PMs think about their own products that they manage, but your career is really your most, and that's something that he really slams home over this weekend. And just like we like to be rigorous about our own kind of product decisions, we need to be even more rigorous about our most important product, ourselves and our own career. The reviews for this course, really speak for themselves. You can see a few video ones over here taken by course alum, Deepika, who's based in India. There's a short clip on how she focuses on whether this course is worth it. You'll see a few more above and below. I'm not going to click on any of them, just in the interests of time. But actually, before I'm not going to go on with this course website any longer, you can check it out on bit.ly/Shreyas-course, because we're actually fortunate to be joined by 3 alumni of Shreyas's course: Jess, Rachel, and Rajat. And we're going to be starting off actually with Rajat. Rajat, over to you if you're able to come off mute.
Yeah, hey, thank you, Shrey, and hello, everyone. My name is Rajat. I manage AI engineering at Front, based in San Francisco, and building software for customer operations and specifically functions like customer support. I've been a long-time alum. I took the course in December 2022, and I've been part of the product club since the beginning, which I'll talk about more in a minute. The Shreyas course covers a broad surface and is entirely practical for leaders on how to manage their careers. I'll share 2 specific examples from my own experience. The first thing that I'll highlight is the promotion drivers template. This is literally a template that Shreyas provides in the course to frame a performance discussion with your manager. I've had, since the course, 2 reviews, 2 performance reviews, 2 different managers, received a promotion in one, received the highest rating in the other. And both times, my managers have said, wow, it's really great to see the clarity of thought in how you're approaching your career. My second manager is a seasoned executive, and the clarity of thought that was able to convey through the template also helped me partner better with him in developing my career and setting out a plan for how to grow in the company. As a leader myself, I'm sure a lot of you on the call who are leaders also face this. Performance reviews tend to be a dreaded time. And I've been trying to get my own reports to also use this template to frame their conversations, which is super helpful for me as a leader too. The second thing that I'll highlight is Shreyas provides guidance on how to partner with recruiters and headhunters in the course. This advice has been a huge unlock for me personally. Since then, I've cultivated better relationships, and I've been able to get inbounds for positions that previously were elusive to me. I'm still not at iMessage terms, but it's already been very meaningful. And I think the last thing that I'd like to highlight beyond the content of the course is the product club. I've had the opportunity to learn from all the student cohorts in the product club. As part of the product club, there's the book club, jobs initiative, coaching opportunities, and also the AI initiative. And given my position at Front, I'm mostly interested and focused on the AI side. In the last 7 months, I've had weekly discussions with other members of the club who are active in the space. We've had over 14 executives and founders from companies like ServiceNow come and share their experiences with the team on how to build generative AI products. Given the speed at which this industry is moving, learning directly from other builders has been invaluable for me personally. And we've also built a community-curated library of over 75 artifacts, which I reference regularly. In the past year and a half, I'll say my investment in the course has definitely yielded significant returns for my career. And I'm happy to talk to anyone who would like to speak with a former student. Thank you. Back to you, Shrey.
Thanks so much, Rajat. With that, Jess, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Jess Cook. I've been just briefly an executive consultant on growth. I've been a product group manager responsible for an entire digital ecosystem and customer operations for an enterprise. I've served as an interim CEO, and I'm currently head of growth and product for a small company doing creative work. I'm really excited to be able to share my journey of coming to the course from May last year. It's nice to be able to share a year after what was the result. So I hope everyone's enjoying this because it's a really good taste, I think, of what you would get in the class. So I took the course arguably and candidly at a time I was really struggling with my career. I think objectively, everyone on paper would say I was doing the best work at the top of my career where I was at, to be expected, and was on track for director, et cetera. But internally, I was really struggling because I was a manager with 7 product managers responsible, all of them at different points in their career. And I had hit a storm in a lot of ways, both in and out of my control. So I think what Shreyas is talking about, like what's in your control and what's out of your control, was exactly that juxtaposition point. So when you take the course, which I encourage you to do, one thing you'll hear in the midst of an amazing amount of information is don't ever turn your career management down to 0. And I think for many of us, this is okay, duh, yeah, I get it. However, being honest, with the pandemic, I had a bunch of executive present projects, et cetera. I had made the very common mistake of taking care of my job, not taking care of my career. And I didn't have a manager that was guiding me. And truthfully, there was a huge gap that I was letting go slide, having a kind of an expectation that, of course, I've got it, but not paying attention to those cracks that were really starting to show. And so I took the course at a time when I really needed some change. And I can absolutely say that after that weekend, it was a 180 for me. I realized I really needed to make some major changes. I needed to address my gaps to be able to get where I wanted to go. And I left the company in July. So 2 months later, my entire team hired back out. And I've leveraged the course and the materials that Shreyas has provided, as well as the continuing education and support and thoughtfulness after that to really galvanize my life and my career in a different direction that's much more suited to where I want to be. And so I've addressed gaps with continued learning, et cetera. I've diligently focused on my priorities, and really the materials that Shreyas provided helped provide a scaffold that I was then able to make into a bigger framework. I would say the biggest thing coming out of the course that I immediately took was I'm the product, and I'm the most important product that I need to take care of. And if I'm taking care of that product with the same tenacity and fierceness I take care of my product at my job, I will actually have the long-term ROI. And so afterwards, from that point, I'm probably from one of the lowest points in my career on a trajectory far higher than it would have been if I hadn't had this course at the time that it came in my life. And I left in July. By August, I was an interim CEO, did that role for 3 months. I've now generated 172% increase of growth at the company that I'm at. I'm being realistic about what I want and what I don't want, and better setting boundaries, and I'm seeing the dividends of that. And so I think one thing I would share is that the course really made me realize how much of a little bit of intention can shift your direction. You'll get candor, you'll get realistic, you'll get clarity on what you need to do differently from the course. I also think, though, you'll get nuance, and the nuance takes longer to germinate and come out, but you can keep returning back to it as part of the materials, which I found to be extremely helpful. The investment in yourself with the class, with this time that you're already taking on your Sunday, as well as any career development, is an actual investment in yourself. And so I just think I'm really grateful for my past self for putting that investment forward so that I can be here today talking about what everything has changed as a result. So thanks. Back to you, Shrey.
Thanks so much, Jess, for sharing us on your journey. Rachel, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Trey. Hey, everyone. So I'm Rachel, based in San Francisco, currently a growth product manager over at Atlassian. Maybe you've heard of a little product called Jira or Confluence. So I work on growth initiatives there. I took the course only a couple weeks ago, but I have to say it's already just, yeah, I guess similar to what Jess was talking about, like a 180, I would say, in terms of mindset. But I think for me, what I can really feel almost physically is a different confidence, I would say, in how I approach my job, but also my career. One of the things that if you take the course, which I would definitely recommend that you do if you can, is around lighthouse goals, and also thinking about your career in terms of 20-year, in terms of 20-year arcs, which I think throughout my career so far, I've really thought about what's just interesting and exciting to me in that moment, which has been, I think, great in terms of getting experience and breadth across a bunch of different, types of companies, types of products, types of business models. But I'm like at a place in my life and personally now where I feel like I'm a bit at a crossroads and really trying to think deeply about, what is it that I want to be doing for this next sort of chapter? And so the course has definitely come along at a really helpful time for me. And I feel, again, much more confident in how I'm thinking through those decisions because of some of those frameworks that Shreyas had shared in the course. I think time will tell exactly what path I take, but being able to go through that and just have that self-confidence, I think is priceless. Back to you, Shrey.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And a special thank you also to Rajat and Jess. Before we resume back with the Q&A, just wanted to show you this chart. As product people, we like to see numbers, so we actually ran them. We asked students from the last cohort to rate their confidence level in these crucial areas of career management before they took the course. We then asked them the exact same questions after the course. What I find most striking here is just a substantial increase in their learning and understanding of some really important topics just after spending one weekend with the course material in Shreyas. Topics like how to work with executive recruiters, how to make yourself stand out in a hyper-competitive jobs environment, how to pick the right companies. I think there was a general understanding that if you can pick the right companies, it can really supercharge your career, like from the cohort, but also the wrong company can really make you stagnant. And also areas such as how to manage up and get promoted. For us as a course team, it's always really inspiring just to see such a high overall impact that this course can have on people. And now for the special announcement that I mentioned at the beginning of the seminar. Shreyas is offering everyone who's attending this seminar $100 off for the August cohort of his course, which starts in exactly a month from now. The code is on screen and it is collab100. It'll work for the first 50 people who sign up using the code. So if you're interested in joining the course, just head over to Maven and enroll. I can show you real quick just how it works. This is the course page that I went over. To use this code, you can simply enter it at the checkout page. Just gonna quickly enter it right here. Waiting for it to load, collab 100, and you click apply, and there you go. It's valid for $100 off specifically for the August cohort on August 24th and August 25th. If you have already enrolled for the August cohort at full price, don't worry, you can just fill out the form at the bottom of this slide at bit.ly/enroll-student-discount. So again, the code is collab100 for $100 off the regular price for this upcoming cohort of the PM career course. With that, I'm gonna pass it back to Stina for Q&A. Stina also took the course earlier, and I think she wanted to share what impact this course had before she formally starts the Q&A. So with that, Stina, over to you.
Thanks, Shrey. I'm Stina, based in Copenhagen. My background's in international growth startups, so leading teams of PM design and UXR, as well as any of those shiny new products that maybe the founders really, that you have to do a lot of stakeholder management. The course was transformative for me. Maybe I've said it before, there was a before and after in my career of taking the course. I established permanent residence in Denmark shortly after, which allowed me to use my stack rank a lot more deeply. So I went into the course thinking, okay, I'm going to do the lighthouse goals, which I did along the way, but I think in true reflection, it took a very interesting path on what truly matters for me. And so now I've joined a team dedicated to transforming their product operating model. And I'm still utilizing numerous tools, but now also in that consultative sort of shifting the organizational mindset as well, which is truly one of my passions too. So additionally, joining the product club after being one of the first, leading the book club, which shouldn't be a surprise based on my screen, has been amazing. The opportunity to actively recall what we've learned in a peer-to-peer coaching setup has been amazing. We joke at like product therapy sometimes, but it really helps to have perspective, not in a mentorship way, but in a very organic, natural way as well. It's been super rewarding. And yeah, I cannot imagine my career without taking this course. I don't want to. And I'm always learning something new. And Shreyas's ability to distill such complex topics into just such sharp truth is something I regularly try to emulate in my day-to-day now. So I'm constantly like, how would this be phrased as simple as possible if Shreyas had said it? So yeah, I cannot speak kindly enough for it. And I'm so grateful to this group. And I hope you will take genuinely the testaments because yeah, so real.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to everybody for sticking here for the past 60 minutes or so. We are going to do at least 30 minutes of Q&A. So let's get started. Stina, what questions can I answer?
Yes, I think one area is this dynamic with engineers. There's an expectation that a lot are always looking for super high level precision before they take action. And this can often cause slowdown. Maybe the high integrity commitments become timelines. So how do you influence through product sense in that environment?
So here's where some of the vocabulary I shared with you and the frameworks come in handy. So in what types of cultures are engineers typically looking for a lot of precision and a lot of just like details? Oh, everything needs to be spelled out in the PRD. I'll tell you, I had worked at an extreme version of this culture at Yahoo, where I was like a newbie PM there in 2006. And so I didn't know what PM was and what the right way to PM was. And so I let like my peers, including my engineering counterparts, guide me, right? Like on that. And what I found like intuitively a bit odd is like in the part of Yahoo I was in, it was common for engineering managers to basically say that if it's not in the PRD, it's not going to get built. And I used to be an engineer before, so that's not how I operated. So I would say, okay, even if that makes sense, there's so many detail level decisions that every engineer makes as part of building a product, as part of building a product experience. Like you can't expect me as a PM to spell out every single detail, because at some point it's like indistinguishable from code. Because in some ways the code is the spec for the product. It's just a very detailed executable spec of the product. So like, where do we draw the line? And unabashedly, the engineers that I worked with, not all of them, but many of them said, yeah, if it's not in the PRD, it's not going to build. Don't blame us. So that's one example of precision. Another example of precision is when it comes to scheduling and estimation. When does this happen? This usually happens in PM dominated cultures. Okay. And Yahoo was PM dominated at the time already. So what happens in PM dominated cultures is the engineers and engineering managers are basically evaluated on, did you ship on time or as committed? And did you ship at approximately the quality level that is expected? That's it. Right? Like they're not evaluated on like factors like, is it a good product to use? Is it a good experience for customers? Is it solving actual problems for customers in the way we expect? Is it having any business impact? What in PM dominated cultures, engineers and engineering managers rightly basically say that's the job of the PM, right? Our job is to build. And if it doesn't work, this is literally something I heard even engineering directors and VPs say. If it doesn't work in the market, don't blame us, because we built what the PMs asked us to build. So first you have to understand that most likely the reason this is happening is because it's a PM dominated culture, right? So now if you are a leader, or even if you're an individual contributor PM and you want to fix this within your organization, I can give you like some tactics, but the tactics are not going to work. Or they'll have very short term. I will give you some tactics, but the tactics, the short term stuff is only going to work on the short term, right? The right long-term change to make, which I have made multiple times when I've encountered this situation where I inherited an org which is PM dominant or dominated, is to nudge it over time to PM guided, right? to, within my team, remember, within my inner world, within that world, create an environment where it's actually PM guided. And that means more tension between PM and engineering on what to build. That means more pushback on the features that I want to build, but it's actually good. When you do that, most of this problem will disappear, because then engineers will say, of course, we understand that you can't specify all the details and we have to build the PRD incrementally. We have to build the spec incrementally. We have to build out the mocks incrementally. And they'll also say, of course, we understand that this is an ambiguous initiative. So we cannot predict this in advance and exactly the date when we're going to launch. So that is the main thing I will suggest, is like nudge your team from being PM dominated to PM guided. Again, if there are more questions on how to do that, we can talk about it. Right now, a couple of tactics to use, just to leave you with like short-term ways to deal with this. Mainly when you get this kind of request for like precision, right? What I want you to do is to basically convey to the engineer or the engineering manager that, look, it is going to be hard to have this degree of precision, right? And so what I want to ask you is, what is driving it? What is driving this request for this extremely high degree of precision? And so this will require you to have the engineering manager, tech lead, or whoever, senior engineer, have empathy with you, right? And the way to build empathy, this is actually a fabulous technique that from The Hard Thing About Hard Things, the book by Ben Horowitz. Basically, in there, he made, I think, the VP of operations and the VP of marketing, who were constantly fighting, switch jobs. Literally, like one took the other person's job, like they swapped. And then pretty much all the conflict was gone in a few months' time. So why? Because empathy, right? So in this case, the tactic, and this is like a master tactic to employ, is essentially to say, I'm not quite sure from my past experiences, how to create such a detailed spec that you have clarity on everything and that you can precisely determine dates and scope and everything else that you want to determine. Okay. So can you please, can I ask you to just this one time partner with me to write the PRD? Right. And in fact, you tend to have seen, you could be a PM. It's a great thing you're an engineering manager. I'm glad that you're the engineering manager for this team. Right? But you could be a PM. I wouldn't even mind if you actually took ownership and lead of doing this, right? So this is an advanced tactic, and you should only do it if you have the communication skills and the credibility. Like, you shouldn't do it on a new team where you haven't yet established credibility. But assuming you established some credibility, you've been on the team for 6 months, and the engineering manager thinks you are competent, try this technique. All your problems will be solved, right? So this is a tactic you can try right away. And it's actually along the lines of moving your org to PM guided, right? With moving your team to being a PM guided culture. So that is actually the solution, right? What I just described with this one tactic is more like a band-aid you can apply, and it'll work. It'll heal the wound. But the main thing is just move your organization to PM guided culture, and you won't have these problems. All right, what's next?
Thanks. I wrote down new tools. Okay, so PMs are expected to play a balancing act. And I'm curious, you talked a little bit about the engineering, but also can you provide some advice on good friction versus bad friction with engineering and design? An example could be design might think, okay, we just provide the UX, the wireframes, and that's it. Or maybe you want to get them involved in roadmap planning, and there's tension around what the expectation of the craft is. Yeah, can you provide some advice on what that good tension or good friction is versus the bad?
Yeah, so a lot of the friction and the tension is a feature, not a bug. So let's just say, if we were to assign a label, let's just say that a lot of this tension is good tension, is good friction. What I'd like to call out is more of what is bad. And so there are maybe like a few categories I want to go through that I consider bad friction. Okay. So first one is the lack of friction altogether. In my view, that is bad friction. right? The absence of friction. Because in that case, what has happened is everybody's staying in their lanes, right? And everybody's doing this, like just pointing fingers elsewhere. To me, that has actually been the most frustrating as an ambitious product person who wants to build successful products, right? For me, that has been the most frustrating situation, because it's like nobody wants to take responsibility for anything other than this is what I'm supposed to do. This is the narrow job I'm supposed to do. So if it's something in this narrow range, then talk to me. Otherwise, I don't care. And so I just want to call out, like, that is an example of like bad friction, right? Okay. Another one, where there are arguments, fights even, and they are related more to titles. Okay. And it keeps going back to titles. Okay. Which is, well, this is what design is supposed to do. This is what engineering is supposed to do. This is what PM is supposed to do. Okay. So I'll give you an example of something that is happening these days a lot. Is these days, here's the reality. Okay. Again, you all came here for real talk, so I'll give you real talk, right? Here's the reality. Product marketing used to be a very important function in the 90s at tech companies, tech product companies. In fact, back then, it was common that product management reported into product marketing. So product management would report to the VP of marketing. Okay. That was very common. Okay. Over time, over a decade or so, maybe 15 years between the year 2000 and 2015, what happened is product management took away most of the strategic aspects. Okay. And aspects that required intuition, aspects that required market insight and whatever, all of that stuff. Product management took away most of those, if not all of those, from product marketing. And then what ended up happening is now, like, product marketing is just like, in most places, product marketing, some people say, oh yeah, isn't that the team that writes the blog post, right? Or isn't that the team that manages launches, right? Or that creates the product video, right? So I'm just sharing that as an example of what happens. So what is happening currently? Currently, what is happening? There are a few things happening, actually. Product operations is starting to take over some of the operational aspects of what marketing owns. So that's interesting, right? Like launch management and a few other things. But leaving that aside, focusing on PM and design, and designers are saying, we want to own strategy. We want to own the product strategy. In some companies, this is happening. Like, we want to own product strategy. And why do we want to own product strategy? Because you need research and you need this sense of, look at Brian Chesky, look at Steve Jobs, they're designers, they're so awesome, it's whatever. Or I read somewhere, whatever the case might be. And so now there is this tussle, right, between product management and design of owning strategy. And again, if it goes back to, oh, this is what this title is supposed to do, that's a problem. That's a problem. Because ideally, look, here's in a PM guided culture, which I believe is the ideal culture. You should try to sustain a PM guided culture as long as possible. Ideally, in a PM guided culture, what happens is, yeah, in some cases, design may own strategy, a designer may own strategy, but that's because the PM doesn't have yet the maturity or the competence to be owning product strategy, right? So in those cases, it's fine. But if it's only centered around title, right? If the VP of design is, Chesky said this at a conference and Chesky is amazing, so we need to listen to Chesky, right? Brian Chesky. That's going to create a lot of unhealthy friction. Okay. So last example I'll share of just bad friction or tension is when there is friction and there is conflict, but the conflict is more around what will make my life easier or what will make my functions life easier than around what will it take to win, right? And I know this sounds, of course, yeah, that's bad. But the reason I highlight this is if you're a leader, it's your job to call it out. It's your job to call out the elephant in the room, which is, it seems to me that the friction we are having is essentially about, and again, this goes back to the happiness. This is especially common with engineering teams, but it's not restricted to engineering teams, where most of the friction is related to what's going to keep engineers happy. And not just that, every single engineer on the team needs to be happy. Otherwise, PM is not doing their job, or design it's not doing their job, right? So when there's friction related to that around making life easier, because here's the reality, right? Like in high performance teams, it's a fact. Not everybody is going to be happy all the time. And that dream job, think about the dream job. Each of you should think about whatever dream job you have. I will tell you 100%, I'll bet $1 million on this, right? Which is, even in your dream job, you are going to have friction. Even in your dream job, you're not going to be happy all the time. So we have to forget this fantasy of being happy all the time. And if I have a bad day, that means the company is toxic. That's nonsense. And some of this nonsense you're getting fed by the social media. So just be aware that it's not necessarily the case that anytime you're unhappy for a day or a week even, right, and you didn't get your way, that means like you need to create friction around you. So those would be a few examples that I would share that not many people will tell you about, but are, I think, examples of bad friction.
That was good. More notes. One that came up is I was surprised to see power driven under PM subcultures. Fitting this into the framework, maybe this exists for everyone, that everyone cares about power. You could see the power driven dynamic in all of the crafts.
Yeah, and the way perhaps it was expressed in the framework I shared is it's more CEO driven, right? Because essentially CEO has the ultimate power. So therefore, anything driven, there are some PMs who just basically just say the CEO wants to do this. And they are that interface. They think about themselves. If it's a large company, it's an VP, SVP, senior, whatever, right? Like just substitute the CEO for the right level. But the point is that they see themselves as that interface, and they are very protective of that interface. Like only I can, they don't say it outright, but essentially that's how they behave. And so that is like the kind of anti-pattern of manifesting as like a power-driven dynamic. Now, if the question is, but other functions also tend to sometimes utilize power as absolutely they do, it's just not as common. It's not as common. Now, the engineering manager will wield power, but it's usually via a proxy of the size of the team. Because the engineering manager is very well aware, or the engineering leader is very well aware, that they manage the largest team, and they manage the team that does the actual work, like the actual work of what gets shipped to customers. The engineering managers are aware that like they manage that team. So they wield power through that, through like basically blackmailing you. This is like the negative part of power, but like they wield power through blackmailing you. Like if you want what you're asking for, I control all the resources here. So like you need to make me happy, or you need to make whatever. So that's how they wield power. Whereas in the end, again, I'm not saying PMs always do this, but in the cases where I have seen it, PMs are doing it by channeling some powerful executive and like being their representative, sometimes being their exclusive representative, and sometimes basically playing a game where like they don't care, they themselves don't care about what happens to the product, as long as they're able to successfully decode what the CEO wants and then use that for their own promotions and for their own growth.
I think we talk a lot about the engineering dynamic, and there's also the design dynamic. So there's a lot of questions around the collaboration with design, either like what the right type of collaboration is. Also, it seems there's a lot of teams where designers are being heavily shared, or that the designer feels, okay, once I share something, like the PM isn't actually taking it. It's got solid research and backing. And so can you talk a little bit about how to go about improving that when I feel so much of the focus is typically on the product and engineering relationship, design being equally important and varying across companies?
So is the question more about sometimes designers use research as like the thing, like almost like a crutch, and then that can lead to friction?
Yeah, or like how do I get them involved? Like I'm sharing a design team with a bunch of different teams, but then also designers bring something to me, and then the PM turns the blind eye to research or whatever it is. So it's this catch-22, like you want to work with them, there's not enough capacity. When you do work with them, you turn down their idea. And so how can you improve, more specifically, I think the question, the dynamic between product and design? Yeah.
Oh, I love this question, and I could spend literally half an hour or more just on this question because there's so many layers. But let's see. So I'll make a few observations here. Number one, yes, it is very common that design or designer gets involved and they're told like, oh, we need your help. And this is roughly what we want. This is what we are trying to do. And the designer is very excited, and the designer goes off and either engages research or does their own research, depending on whether there's a separate UXR team. But anyway, they do some research and then they produce something and they share it with the team. And the team listens to them, says, wow, this is amazing, et cetera, et cetera. And then they say, this is great, but we can't do any of this. Unfortunately, we can't do any of this. And because we are aiming for an MVP, right? Like we need to fail fast, we need to ship fast, and we need to tackle the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit is very clear. And this can be and is very frustrating for the designer. And like rightly, right? So this is a very common situation, right? Where everybody has the right intent here, right? But we still end up in this state, right? So why does this happen? Okay. So first thing you need to understand is how designers think, especially as a PM. I don't expect engineering leaders to do it like at a quality of 8 or 9 out of 10, but I certainly expect you as a PM leader to do what I'm about to say, at least a quality of 8 out of 10, if not 9 out of 10. You need to understand how designers think. Okay. You need to think, understand how designers think, and you need to understand how generally design teams work, right? And one fundamental observation is designers are so good at what they do because they start from the bigger picture, right? That's one. They are also so good at what they do because they care about the details. So it's not like designers are just like no, they go from like the bigger picture to the minutest details. All right. Now, if you're a PM, you're thinking, I also do that, right? No. You don't do it the way a designer does, typically, right? Always exceptions, of course. But the point is, what designers want to understand is what is it that we're really trying to do here, particularly in terms of customer motivation, user motivation, right? They really wear that hat very well, right? So like, why would a customer even want to buy this SaaS tool in the first place? Yeah, sure, you're asking the designer to build the onboarding flow, right? Or whatever, like to have some mock-ups of an onboarding flow of this SaaS tool, right? But the designer cannot do his or her job well unless they understand deeply the motivations of the person, of the human being that is going through this sign-up flow, right? And that takes time. It is often time you're not taking as a PM to your own detriment and to your team's detriment, right? Not every PM, but many/some PMs, right? So that is what the designer is doing. This is just one example, but that is what the designer is trying to do, both at the very highest, the macro level and the micro level, right? Now, if your intent was to just get some mock-ups for this next MVP, right? Of course, your job is to clarify that, right? What I have found works well, though, is it doesn't work well to just tell the designer, okay, just produce some mocks. I don't care about the big stuff, blah, blah, blah. This is what many PMs do, right? Like, I don't care about all this. We just need to do this because there's a Q1 OKR and we need to hit it. And you don't know how many tensions there are and how many stakeholders. Yes, all of that is true in your head. But what you want to do with design is you want to walk that tightrope, right? You want to be crystal clear that the immediate output that they need to produce is a set of very tactical mock-ups that are only an incremental improvement over the current flow. If that is what you really want, just say that, right? At the same time, give them room to explore. Meaning, don't just fill up the time that the designer has with, okay, how much time, how many hours, tell me how many hours, how many days you're going to take to change the font or the spacing and the whatever, add these 3 fields or whatever the heck you're trying to do in the short term, right? You want to also invite them and encourage them, right? And you want to participate with them to some degree, give them context, because sometimes they're lacking that context, especially the business context. So spend time doing that. Because in that situation, the designer will understand what it is that you're doing much better. And you'll be surprised how much on board they are, as long as you're setting the expectation of what needs to happen, at the same time giving them space, right? This giving the space is not something that happens, right? Because we are always like, go, right? But you have to understand that's not how designers think. That is one important aspect of why I think this happens. All right. I know there are many questions, and as with all of these, we can never get to all the questions, but if it's okay with folks, and if it's okay with you, Stina, maybe we can go on for maybe like 10 more minutes and maybe tackle some rapid fire type questions.
Yes.
All right. Great. Let's do it.
So if a PM is working in a PM service culture, is there a way for them to move into a PM guided culture?
Yes, there's actually a whole method to doing that. And again, that would take 30, 40 minutes. Maybe I could record that at some point for folks, because I've done it many times as a PM myself. So there are two, basically, I'll try to answer this briefly. Basically, there are like 2 levels at which this can happen, right? One is you can stay in your current company or team or org and then move that culture to being more PM guided, right? You very likely cannot do that if you are like an individual contributor PM. If you're like an associate PM, PM1, PM2, you cannot do that. But the moment your title is senior PM, I expect you to start building this skill, okay, to be able to do it. And this is essentially a skill of influence, okay? If you are an associate PM and you're in a PM dominated culture or a PM service culture and you want to move to a PM guided culture, the best way to do it is to switch orgs or switch companies. That's the truth. Okay, that is just the truth. Now, if that is not the case, if you're senior PM, group PM, director, VP, SVP, whatever, right? You have a lot of influence. First, think about the inner world versus the outside, right? And focus on the inner, focus on what you can control. Within that, I'll give you the main tip, okay? And particularly if it's, say, you're in a PM dominated culture and you're seeing all the problems of the PM dominated culture, even though everybody listens to you, you're seeing all the problems, right? So what do you do to move it to PM guided? This is what I've done. And I've done this multiple times. I did it at Twitter once. I did it at Stripe once or twice, at least once, where I became responsible for a team that I realized within the first week that, oh, this is PM dominated and I don't like that. So this is what you do. You sit down, typically with your engineering counterpart, sometimes also with the design counterpart. You do that, say, let's take the scenario if you're new to the team, right? You do that after you've done your first round, your listening tour, whatever, you've done your one-on-ones with PMs, engineers, designers, et cetera, within the team, et cetera, et cetera. And then at some point you share the following with your other functional counterparts. You basically say, look, I'm just amazed at like how much this team has accomplished with all of this. And I really enjoyed all the conversations. I did want to point out one theme that came out very clearly to me as part of these conversations. And that is that, frankly, I think PMs have too much influence and too much power within this team. Okay. And I want you to say it like that, because the reason you want to say it like that is because it should feel surprising to the other person. Wait, what did he just say? What did she just say? Yeah, I feel PMs have wield too much power. And the reason it's surprising is because they're usually used to working with PM leaders who like are happy that PMs wield so much power, right? So you're saying something just odd. Then you might want to give some examples of what you've heard, what you've observed, right? But you want to follow that up with saying, I don't think that this is a sustainable place for us to be if we are to win in this market with this product, right? And what I would like is for this to be more of a turf of equals rather than to have such a hierarchical relationship around who gets a say in the product. So that is the setup, okay? And as you go through this, like at some point you want to ask them, does this make sense? Does this feel aligned with what you think? Or you might even want to ask, okay, how wrong am I in this observation? So you want to provoke their reaction. In most cases, if you do the right setup, they'll say, yeah, of course, you're right. Now, so that's one step, right? And obviously you have to do this with some class and finesse. But the point is, once you get the leaders on board, here's the next thing I want you to do. In any team, say the team has 15 engineers, 2 designers, and a few PMs, 3, 4 PMs, let's just say. In any such team of this size, anywhere, you'll have at least 2 or 3 people out of the 20 people who are not PMs, right? Who are actually pretty good at product. So I want you to start elevating them. I want you to start elevating their voice. I want you to have them join the meetings that typically only PMs go to, right? So that's the other kind of tactic at that level that I want you to do. And as I did that, right, like I found that like the other engineers notice, right? And then we ask engineers more, we ask designers more, what should we build, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what kind of actually builds that. Now, the typical solution that tends to get shared for this, which works, but it's not the only or even the best solution, is just take them to customer meetings, right? And then they will notice the pain of the customer and all of that. The thing is, yes, they'll notice the pain of the customer, but they also have, what is it called? There is a term for it that I'm blanking on, but basically the term is you've gone through such a bad experience, you've been abused so much. Learned helplessness, right? That's the term. So they'll have learned helplessness. So you need to get them out of that learned helplessness. So just like sending them to customer meetings, which is the solution 90% of times that get shared, is not actually the main thing. It is helpful, but you have to do some of these other things first. All right, what's next?
Any advice or techniques on how to approach effort and time estimation across the group?
Yeah, effort and time estimation, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be precise. So does your team have that understanding? Right? And do you all understand? Because here's the thing. Look, there is no spreadsheet. Don't expect in response to this question, like, oh, actually the entire world is missing some spreadsheet or template. And let me share this spreadsheet or template with you around exactly how you list out the tasks and how you do scoping and how you do interdependency mapping and all of that. And voila, right? This will no longer be a problem. No matter, you might have a PhD from MIT in math or whatever else. No, you are not going to be able to create a template or a spreadsheet that solves the scoping issue. It is impossible. It is impossible. Okay. So that is the reality. So the question is, everybody on the same page on that reality? And that is where there is this like delusion, shared delusion we have, right? Like the PMs know this. The engineering manager, of course, knows this. The designers, sometimes if they're early career, they might not know this, right? But whatever the case may be, it's like we all try to portray that, yeah, of course, these dates are set in stone. And of course, this estimate needs to be bulletproof, et cetera, et cetera. When deep down, each of us knows, if you're smart enough to get hired by a good company, by this company, that there is never a correct answer. So it's about just clarifying that. It's about just being clear. Yeah, there's never a correct answer. And these estimates are just that, they're estimates. Usually the engineering manager is trying to educate everyone on this, but the PMs don't want to listen. Why? I'm not blaming PMs. The PMs don't want to listen because they're getting pushed on the dates by the CEO, right? So they need to provide something. So the right approach to this type of situation is, this is the situation of managing expectations. Okay. And so how do you do that? So the best tool I've found, a tool I learned at Stripe, I didn't come up with it, somebody else did, but I thought this was brilliant. Basically, it's the idea of having 2 dates. Let's just talk about estimation in terms of dates. So it's about like basically most teams have 1 date, which is this is the launch date. So at Stripe, at some point after we like had a lot of problems with all this estimation and setting expectations for sales and for the go-to-market teams, we were like, wait, why isn't it here to here? And we prepared all this shit and now the product is late and let's do a postmortem and all that nonsense bullshit, waste of time. It's okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have 2 different dates. One date is called a committed date, and it was in our launch cal. One date is the committed date, right? The other date is you can call it the target date. Okay. So target date and committed date, right? Target date is internal to your team. It's part of the inner world. Now you can publish it if you want, but it's your internal target date. Okay. That date, keep it fairly aggressive. Keep it fairly aggressive. The insight here is that the committed date can be the more conservative date, right? And so anytime you have an estimation, usually your engineering counterpart will say it can take between 4 and 6 months or 4 and 6 weeks. So your target is likely 4 weeks, but your committed is maybe 7 weeks. You add a buffer to it, right? And you tell everybody that the target is our internal target, and nobody gets blamed, nobody gets fired, nobody gets demoted, nobody gets a bad rating because you did not hit the target date, right? The point, though, is that the committed date is what the go-to-market teams go by, is what the sales team goes by, right? And if they're going to communicate to the customer, then maybe there's a process to do. You don't just get to communicate even the committed date externally. But if there is a necessity to do it, then there's a process to do, right? So that is a tool that I've actually found to be very useful. And it accepts, the reason it works in practice is because it accepts that this is an imprecise science. Instead of banging your head against the wall, and just like the wall is not going to get damaged, it's only your head, right? So that's what I would recommend. Okay, let's maybe take one last question and then we'll end it.
Yeah. So a lot of planning requires more detailed dependency either in the roadmap or in the discovery piece before that discovery is sufficiently done. So how do you avoid having the plan dictate the result of the discovery?
Yeah, so I'll share a couple of, this is a very real situation, right? I'll share a couple of thoughts. Number one, if you are part of a very large, complex organization working on a mature product with a lot of dependencies, unfortunately, in most cases, 90+% of cases, okay, you are not going to be able to do the job of like perfect prioritization and ideal discovery. You just aren't, right? Because what's going to happen is in a practical situation, you're going to have massive pressures of all sorts, which is like, oh, the planning season. By the way, planning is going to start for some people now soon in August. And so it's, oh, our planning cycle is August 15th through October 2nd. And these are the various milestones that the finance team has created, or the biz ops team, or some other kind of like consulting team within the company has created for the planning process. And these are the spreadsheets. And these are the updates we need on August 25th. And then there's going to be this stage. And everybody like looks at it, and people, there are all hands meetings that are held about the planning process with some fancy schmancy timeline around it. And everybody goes, yeah, okay, we get it. And the managers get excited. Finally, there's some purpose in my life for the next 6 weeks to go through these nonsense meetings, and these check-ins are set up, and executive check-ins, and then various dependency maps are created, right? This, if you're, especially if you're a manager level person at any company, this is the bullshit you're spending your time on. So guess what? If this is the reality for mature products and very large companies, this is the reality, right? You're not going to be able to do proper discovery. You're not going to be able to, you are going to basically prioritize. Here's the reality. You're going to basically prioritize based on what is easy and straightforward to do. Number one. And number two, what is it that the CEO expects you to say? This is the reality, right? 90+% of cases. In the other cases where it's a startup, etc., this question shouldn't even appear, right? Like you already have the answer to the question. So what about the remaining 10%? So I said in 90% of the cases, this is what's going to happen. So what about the remaining 10%? So that's what I'll end my response with. So usually that 10% case where you're actually able to do a much better job with this and not just play the game and, yeah, sure, if these are the dependencies that we can resolve, then we'll work on the features that utilize these dependencies, right? And so that's the default. But how do you actually do proper prioritization? How do you prioritize based on actual business impact, actual value, etc.? The situations there are where the leader of the org is managing the inner world really well and is acting as the shit umbrella for the stupid process for planning for your team, right? And again, I speak from experience. I've done this in the past, where the company I was in had a horrible planning process and all sorts of templates for every manager to fill out and nonsense. And I told my org, the part I control, that inner world, I told them, don't do any of this. Don't do any of this. Like we had a strategy. So one solution to, by the way, the best solution, again, it's the 10% case. The best solution to this is you have a product strategy. That is a real strategy. It's not a strategic plan, which is just an Excel spreadsheet and you put the word strategic in front of it. So now it's a strategy. That's not a strategy. Okay. So what you need to do is have a real product strategy. Once you have a real product strategy, actually your planning takes care of itself. Most of the times in these stupid planning, I've been part of all of these planning processes. My peers would spend the entire 6 weeks like busy with like meetings and spreadsheets. And they would spend, I don't know, I haven't calculated, but easily over 200, 300 hours on this planning nonsense. Okay. By contrast, this is no exaggeration whatsoever, I would spend less than 10 hours. So again, order of magnitude less, right? How? And often I had more scope than them. So how did I do it? It's because I had a strategy. My team had a strategy. The strategy was agreed upon with the executives, and it was a real product strategy. It was not some nonsense. It was not some stupid vision and, oh, this is our strategy. No, it was a real product strategy. Okay. So once you have a real product strategy, the planning takes care of itself. And in fact, you're proactively resolving the dependencies. You don't wait for planning season to do it. And you've already aligned the people, the other dependency teams, towards like why your thing is important, right? So it's already baked into the plans, right? So those are some tactics that your planning should actually start before the planning season. And again, it needs to be informed by the strategy. But again, the shit umbrella part is very important as well. Because we had this set up, right? I was able to tell my team like, yeah, don't bother with this template. Don't bother with this. Don't bother with this. But I still had to present some kind of like that dog and pony show that you have to like, oh, now you're representing your team to executives and showing them your plan so that they can bless your plan, all that nonsense. So I had to still represent my team there. So I would take the risk of like basically saying, don't do all this nonsense, but we will still present it in the format that our executives expect. Or that the rest of the company expects. So I am taking both the personal risk and the personal responsibility of being that translation layer. So that's why like having a strong leader is important in this situation. And that's where that 10% situation comes in, where even if you're part of this large organization, actually you're able to do it on a more, let's just call it first principles basis, or on the basis of what is the real strategy, what are the real customer problems that you need to solve, what is really going to make your business a juggernaut, what is going to make your product win. But in almost all other cases, your reality is, yeah, you'll just have to prioritize based on random ass factors about which team has that one engineer available that's going to change this backend flag so that you can roll out this feature. And that's just how big companies work. All right. With that, thank you everyone for taking the time. And thank you to all the almost more than 550 of you who stuck around for this long. We will be sharing the recording, so please be on the lookout for that and watch the recording, because a lot of what I shared, while very concise, has a lot of layers to it, and the more you watch it, the more you'll see it. The recording will only be available for 2 or 3 weeks, so do make an attempt to watch it during that time. Also, you are free to share the recording within your team. Do not post the recording publicly. I would not be so candid if this were going to be posted publicly. Please do share it within your team. And I just wanted to take this moment to thank the team that put all of this together. This would not happen without a lot of hard work goes on behind the scenes to make this happen and make this go so smoothly. So thank you to Shrey, thank you Stina, thank you Rajat, Rachel, and Jess. And if we can just do a virtual applause for the team. Thank you to my team. And you all have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Shreyas. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for tuning in, and to each of our panelists as well, to Rajat, to Rachel, to Jess, and of course to Stina. Thank you also very much. I'm just sharing the link to the course as well as the promo code. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely Sunday.